this morning we're going to talk a little bit about embracing those horizontal relationships. Josie and Christy and Susan and Hillary have done a fantastic job talking about our journey through this culture change experience. And so my presentation is going to touch a little bit about that and where we are today and some of the things we're doing. So I'm not sure how much Christy spoke a little bit about our organization, so I'm just going to quickly overview some things that are important about us. What you're looking at right there is our mission, vision, and values, and I'm sure you and your organization also have mission, vision, and values. They're probably very similar to what yours are, but really what you're seeing there is what guides us in everything that we do on a day-to-day basis, and that's what I want you to take away from it. Our focus is on that life purpose and engagement of our residents, engagement of our team members, and of our family members. That's all villagers, everybody who resides within a village, whether they live there, whether they work there, or whether they come to visit. Everything we're going to talk about over the next half an hour or so, make sure that you do get out for lunch, is really to achieve our mission, vision, and values, and that's why it's important. I wanted to cover that with you. This is our village continuum concept. It's actually a very nice version of it is on the wall here. I didn't realize that it was actually out for us. The neat thing about our village concept is that Ron Schlegel, who actually sits with us here this morning, he is our visionary, the visionary of our organization. It's his experiences and his expertise that have crafted this beautiful village concept. And it's that design and that physical structure that really allows us the opportunity to really bring our life of our mission, vision, and values together. We always take into mind the consideration of a continuum. So when we build, and we generally build out all of our properties, is that we make sure that we have enough space to look at. Can we build a long-term care? Do we have different phases of retirement? So they are quite large pieces of land, and that is first and foremost in their mind when making a decision on where it is we're going to place a village. We have neighborhoods for our residents and for our team members. Those neighborhoods are where they live out the majority of their life, but we also have social areas. And then we have what we call the social spine, or this connector that pulls all of those neighborhoods together. We call it our main street, and it's what keeps us vibrant and alive. The next piece, the first one, highlighted the long-term care. So on the left side of the building, that's traditionally how we start our builds. It's the anchor, some might say, to our properties, but we also have different phases of retirement. We do have one standalone retirement home. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the village of Arbor Trails, located in Guelph, but we typically have all of our properties built out in long-term care, retirement, and those different phases of retirement, to be honest. The village continuum concept allows for the opportunity for people to live out their lives to their fullest in one geographical location. So that means you don't need to get up and move somewhere else to another building or another property just because you require more care. That neighborhood model exists in our retirement home just as it does in long-term care. So that means you can be an independent living resident where you can provide for yourself and do everything in your own apartments. You can get some level of care in our assisted living, or perhaps that you need memory support and want to reside in one of our memory care neighborhoods. The nice thing about our organization is that if you find a place that you call home, you don't have to leave it, regardless of the level of care that you need. And that's because we offer a program called Living Choices. So you can purchase additional levels of care to remain where you are. So if you love your apartment and you want to live out your life in your apartment, perhaps your spouse has had to go somewhere else, but you don't want to leave. We can provide that care for you in your retirement apartment, or perhaps that's in your assisted living neighborhood. The nice thing is that you can be in one place that you call home for your entire life. So here's a little map just to show you where we are located. You can orient yourself to the blue. That would be your Great Lakes. I think most of you would have figured that out. I think Christy mentioned we have 16 locations across southwestern Ontario. And today we are continuing to grow. We have 4 different phases of retirement that are in the ground today and are moving forward. We know we will never be the biggest organization. I'm sure there are many of you that work for operators that have many, many more homes than we have today. But we are always striving to be the best at what it is we are trying to do. So our culture change journey. You just spent a number of hours hearing about where we have come from and where we are hoping to strive to. The funny thing about this is that we work for an organization that provides something that most people are fearful of. How many of you long for the day that you can move into a retirement home? How many of you are incredibly excited to get to long-term care? Not many of us, right? And so we provide something that nobody really ever wants to access, which is kind of a funny conundrum, isn't it? And so this is what we are up against. And this is what we call that Western approach to aging. It's very different than what other cultures are doing around the world, and we have to find a way to get around that. None of our efforts would matter unless the change we sought took place in the hearts and the minds of our team members. It's our team members that have that opportunity to be able to drive that change, especially those that interact with our customers, our residents and our family members, and actually other stakeholders as well. The culture change journey. Today, we hold ourselves accountable to moving that needle forward even further by ensuring that it's one of our 5 key success factors. That's how we hold ourselves accountable. So it gets measured, it gets monitored. We know whether we're making progress and if we're not. What's kind of funny about this is that we knew that we wanted to move forward and we had plans in place to do that. But if you remember, those 8 aspirational statements which are listed there that Hillary walked you through, promoting cross-functional teams was one of our aspirational statements. Yet we were driving a structure that was never going to allow us to do that. A traditional structure, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what that traditional structure is and what that means. We want to make sure that if we were going to do that, we had to put something in place or make some changes that would allow us to actually see that aspiration statement come to life. So keep that in mind, promoting cross-functional teams. The potential of our people. The building we sit co-located to today, the Village at University Gates, think about this one statistic. 95% of the nursing envelope that we receive goes to the wages and the benefits of those that provide our care. 95%. So think of the potential of our people. So if you look at that slice of the pie, all the resources and everything that goes into shaping what we do, living out our mission, our vision, our values, really comes out of the people. So how do you harness that potential? So as you know, we've been on quite a journey, and it feels like when you hear some of the things we do, it's funny. I look at the video that Christy was showing and I was like, wow, that was a long time ago. My hair was shorter. I was about 15 pounds lighter, it feels like. So it's really been quite a journey over a length of time. And we've covered a number of things along that journey. We've moved to a servant leadership model, so that's supportive leadership. We've created a role called the neighborhood coordinator. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. We are also in a direction of creating self-functioning teams, so our neighborhood team development program, and moving our way down to having engaged residents and engaged family members. What I want you to keep in mind is that this is our journey, but each one of our 16 villages is at a different place on this chart. Not everyone is down at working through engaged residents and engaged family members. Some of them are still working through some of the issues around servant leadership. Some are still trying to figure out the role of the neighborhood coordinator. The story that Christy told is a great one. The Village at Winston Park is a home that was in existence before we even began this journey. So Suzette, having been there 20 years, so you can imagine when you are working day to day and providing great care and doing great things in an institutional model. And then all of a sudden, one day we show up and say, that's not the right way to do that. We want to do it this way instead. Change is hard for any one of us. So you can imagine that change when you're trying to move this on a day-to-day basis, how difficult that is for our team members, as well as for our residents and families as they begin to understand what it is we're trying to strive towards. So we're not perfect. There are things that we're working on, and there are some villages that are farther along this journey than others. So the role of the neighborhood coordinator. It's really quite a fascinating role. So you can see from my little icons up there what their purpose is: to facilitate the team process and encouraging and supporting team members throughout our journey. They provide the training that the team needs to self-manage and to hopefully work together, to ensure that the team's goals and decisions are in alignment with our mission, our vision, and our values. For 5 years now, we've been investing in this role. It's really a generalist leadership role who's responsible for up to 2 neighborhoods. So if remember, our neighborhoods are comprised of around 32 residents, so at most 64 residents, and then the team members and the family members that go with it. This is someone who comes from any background. They are housekeepers, they are recreation their job is really to come to work every day, dedicated to leading a team that's really dedicated to creating the best day possible for our resident. And that's the cool thing about their job. If they thought that they were coming to work, they were going to do something around improving care, but really when they got there, breakfast was an absolute disaster, then the role is to harness the resources that exist within our villages to solve that breakfast problem. So out go your plans of the day, and you're on to tackle something new. So really, they are a critical piece of our interdisciplinary strategy. So self-directed teams. I think of it as another journey. We are, I guess, almost 3 years into. We rolled this out in fall of 2013 and actually started training a 30-module program around self-directed teams beginning in the winter of 2014. It's a massive investment for us as an organization, but it's designed to shift the locus of control from that of the village leadership to actually a neighborhood team. So imagine teams that are self-scheduling, self-disciplining, determining what the rhythm of the day needs to be based on what the needs of their residents are and what the wishes of their residents are. If you can do that for a moment, that is what the goal is of the Neighborhood Team Development Program. All right. So shifting a little into what that means around this horizontal model. So role clarity. We need to talk a little bit about what that means with respect to service, what it means around alignment, and what that means around leveraging capacity. So let's break it down. I'm sure many of you have seen this concept of an inverted pyramid. The idea being that the importance isn't placed with us that work at the support office. Nobody could care less whether I come to work on any given day, except for maybe my boss who's expecting something, right? The reality is that what's important in the rhythm of the day, it's our neighbors, our residents, our family members. That's where the importance actually lies. So our service is about serving leadership for our team members. Those are our neighbor advocates, as you can see. Each of our team members is deserving of the ability to have an effective relationship with a leader who directly supports them as an individual. As our villages continue to grow and become larger, the departments grow. They grow in size. It becomes increasingly challenging for department leaders or general managers or assistant general managers to have those personalized relationships that exist when you have a smaller environment. Think of it in your own personal life. When you go out to a small intimate gathering and you're at a table, you have an opportunity to converse with probably everyone who is there and know a little bit about what's going on in each of their lives. But when you go to a large function, whether that's a wedding, do you have an opportunity to chat with everybody that's there? No. And when you have a 192-bed long-term care home, as we have here at University Gates, it's kind of like that. It's like being at a wedding every day when you've got 200 plus people in any one location at a time and trying to figure out what's going on with any one person. How could you possibly expect that to be successful? I think a good example of that is always the role of the director of nursing care. So University Gates, again, somewhere between 80 and 100 personal support workers, registered nurses, and RPNs. In a traditional model, that person would be responsible for ensuring the well-being of their day-to-day job. Are they being fulfilled in their job? Do they have the skills? Do they have the tools that they need to actually do their jobs well? One individual for all of those team members. Can that one person truly advocate for that many people and do it well? Who is their voice, those PSWs and those RPNs, when it comes to decisions that are being made? We need a leader who can actually seize the power, reasonably enable their teams to resolve those foundational issues that are happening within our neighborhoods. So how do we ensure that our neighborhoods are equipped with team members that have the education and the tools to be able to perform their assignments and their appropriate level of knowledge and confidence? Well, our frontline team members need a leader who can get for them what they need at all levels, who can read their development needs, and that they're personalized. Finally, providing sincere feedback and recognition requires time to observe and evaluate frontline team members. If you have to look after in excess of 100 team members, how could you possibly see what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, shift by shift? How can you provide that positive feedback when something happens and you're not there to witness it? There's nothing like empowering a team member when observing their performance and recognizing that in the moment. That's what's exciting. Conversely, the same is actually true when you're observing something that requires positive coaching and mentoring. It's easier to do it in the moment, teachable moments, as we say. So we're looking for leaders who can earn their paycheck by actually supporting frontline team members. That's their first and foremost priority. So let's shift to alignment. How are we looking for people that are resident-centered, who can offer that neighborhood focus, that generalist leadership at that neighborhood level? So let's start with resident focus. If we were to define the single most important thing in our business, what do you think it would be? Single most important thing. To live out our mission, right? To provide resident-centered care while putting living first. This role is all about aligning our resources and our people with the most important thing that we can do on any given day. In one sense, changing the culture of aging and creating a social model of living for our residents, but continuing to put our resources towards a clinical organizational structure would actually be a paradoxical exercise, wouldn't it? So to truly embark on this journey, it requires us to leverage our existing assets and rearrange them in a different organizational structure. To truly be resident-centered, we need a leader who can actually support frontline team members and to follow our principles of customer service, who work hard for the individual, for the neighborhood, and the village experience for all that are our residents, our neighbors, and our family members. So let's talk a little bit about that neighborhood focus. Department leaders and general managers are really that thick edge of that wedge. So remember the numbers, 192 bed long-term care home. The GM or the department manager, they can contribute 1 to 192 of their time to each one of those residents. If you move to the department perspective and look at through the lens of the neighborhood, team members or residents can actually have access to 1 of 32 or maybe 1 of 64 of leadership's time. And therefore we have an ability to improve our level of support and our level of advocacy. And then finally, the generalist leadership. We need leadership whose passion, first and foremost, is always asking the question, what is going to make a resident's day great today? And that's every day when they come into work. What could make a family member's day great when they come to visit? If the eggs are bad that day, who's providing that feedback to the team in the department in the kitchen who's helping them ensure that that is changed for today? All right, leveraging capacity. So unleashing those individual team members' strengths and talents, because we all have them. We all have strengths. And increasing the value of that specialization and that scope of practice. So the greatest untapped resources that all of us have are our frontline team members. They are waiting to be engaged. They're waiting to share their talents with us. They are creative as well as passionate. They work in this industry not because it's easy work. They do it because it is a passion and enhancing the quality of life for those residents that we serve each and every day. So who on our leadership team is focused on building frontline team of A players by building a different and effective relationships with team members through our servant leadership style? We will enable and empower our frontline team members to increase their own value, earn that second paycheck we talk about. A leader can find ways to align and connect team members with their strengths and leveraging intangible to gain tangible outcomes. The support of the neighborhood coordinator will allow for other departmental leaders to increase their value of their specialization and their scope of practice. So if you can imagine where a director of nursing or a director of food service or an environmental services director, they can focus on what their specialty is. So for nurses who could actually work on pain management, who can work on maybe their interest and expertise is in infection control, to have the time to focus on that and not dealing with issues that are at the neighborhood level where a neighborhood coordinator can step in and fulfill that need and meet that requirement in a much more timely fashion and do it well, allows us to increase that scope of others that have real specialties that are within our organization. So, what does that relational model of support look like? Well, we've all seen that vertical, or what we traditionally call a silo structure, where you have each department working within their silos. How many of you have been to or done something recently when you think, oh, if I'd only known what they were doing at their side of the table, we could have done this in half the time or half the fashion? I think we've all been there. This is really a traditional healthcare model. It happens in long-term care, it happens in acute care, it happens in a lot of places. So we've gotten to the point where we felt like we were acting one way, but we were still having leadership structured in another way. So it was time to make a change. So coming out of that concept of the generalist and the specialist leadership. This is a way that our team members can be supported by not one, but two different individuals. And what does that mean? Well, if I am a specialist leader, so that means I have some kind of scope of practice that makes me really good at something that I do, perhaps something I've gone to school for, something that I'm passionate about. So if I am a team member, the specialist leader can support me in the knowledge and the proficiency in my specific set of skills that make me a specialist to my neighborhood team. Perhaps they will do that through coaching or through training and education, by providing feedback in the quality of the services that my role provides. The ability to provide or receive mentorship to or from others in a similar role. Relations with other specialists from within that particular department. Support me with our resident-centeredness movement to help me with my growth and development. And then living out the values of Schlegel Villages as an organization. So how is that different from a generalist leader, you might ask? Well, as a team member, my generalist leader, or our neighborhood coordinator in our role, helps me to become an effective member of a cross-functional team. So on my team, there are nurses, there are personal support workers, there are recreation team members, there are housekeepers, there are students, there are volunteers, there are family members. All of those are a part of one greater team within our neighborhood, and they can help me by becoming a more effective member of that team. They help me in supporting neighborhood initiatives. They support the team with the skills and talents that my role actually has to offer. So by knowing me as a person, they can help me use my strengths to be a better team member in my neighborhood. To promote resident-centeredness and customer service, interactions with relationships with neighbors and with family members. To help me with my growth and development, and then once again, to live out the values of Schlegel Villages. So if you think about those two slides, the point is that we don't need one or the other. The reality is that we need both. And to the neighborhood coordinator to focus on the broader goals of the objectives within our neighborhoods, and the specialist to help us hone in on those proficiencies of the technical requirements that we need to achieve those particular objectives. At the same time, our specialist is taking that broader view outside of the neighborhood to look across the entire village to provide support. So they're not focused in on just one locus of a neighborhood, but to actually expand across the entire village. And that helps us as our villages continue to grow. It helps us to leverage from one neighborhood to another, because as we know, we have strengths in some areas and weaknesses in others. And so we can share those when we can communicate about them effectively, and one can learn from the other. So what does that mean so far? Well, the jury might still be out, some might say. We know that we've seen improved customer service. We hear comments like vastly improved and quicker response time. I think back to the village at Humber Heights, and our village located in Etobicoke, Ontario, where when we first incorporated the neighborhood coordinator model, our director of nursing, again, home very large, 192 beds, the family members couldn't believe how quick it was we were able to turn around their concerns or their comments, and when they were being resolved by someone who they knew where to find, when to find them, and that person was ever present within the neighborhood, because they weren't trying to divide themselves in 8 or in 192 with residents and family members, and then add your team members on top of that. So quicker response time. So we know that customer service has really improved with the inception of this role. We know that we've got better communication systems in place. Traditionally, I'm sure you yourselves as well, communication happened within a department. So if food service wanted to know what was going on, they went down to the kitchen or into the kitchen, the lower level we call it, to find out and scope through the book to see what might have been written in there since your last shift, to know was there a particular need or something they were wanting to meet for a resident or a neighborhood. Same with nursing. The nursing communication binders resided at the nurses station, and in there they wrote down information that were pertinent to nurses. So this happened in all of our departments. We did away with all of them. All the communications binders were gone. One binder exists today, and they are within a neighborhood. If you want to know how you can support and what has happened, you need to go to the neighborhood to find out what's going on with those particular residents. And that's how information is shared. So it doesn't matter if you are a nurse or you are a physician or you are a personal support worker or a housekeeper. If you have something valid that you need to share, you're going to write it in a communication book for everybody to know. So a very simple system, but it works well for us. We know that we've got improved leadership retention. I wouldn't be lying if I was to tell you that a number of years ago, we could probably say in excess of 50% turnover with our directors of nursing. The role is massive. It is large. We expect and so that retention in that position alone has just been phenomenal to see. We also know that we don't know what we don't know. And so this whole project is actually being evaluated by Dr. Veronique Bosgard, one of Josie's research chairs here at the RIA. So she's helping to dig into our data and find out what is happening with respect to the role in these neighborhoods to see what is really happening. What is the numbers telling us? So we don't have all of those to date. That is something that is wrapping up very shortly, and hopefully we'll be able to share with others some really tangible evidence-based information. What I can tell you though is that we are seeing stronger cross-functional teams. Every year we provide our team members with the opportunity to be able to provide us feedback on their job, on their roles, on their leadership. So it's actually going on right today in our villages. So it begins in May and ends around the middle of June. We call that our engagement survey. We roll it out through our online platform, and it's an anonymous report where they fill out all the forms or click all the buttons, and then it sends it off to our support who monitors our online platform, and then they kick back to us the data. When we looked at those data points over the last couple of years, one of the categories that we look at is called organizational citizenship. Kind of a funny word, but really what it means is it's our team members' willingness to behave in a way that helps other team members to advance our organizational goals. But it's not been specifically prescribed to them and actually falls beyond their scope of responsibilities. So when I think about it, it means the measurement of those that go above and beyond what we ever have the right to ask them to do. And I can tell you that we have seen significant increases in this particular scoring questions from 2014 to 2015. And when this is finished, I hope we will see the same for this year as well. We also know that this organizational citizenship behavior that exists within our organization has significantly impacted 8 of the 10 different quality of life domains that our residents provide us with feedback on through our Interi Quality of Life Self-Reporting Satisfaction Survey. 8 out of 10 of those domains, which is really quite phenomenal. So we are seeing some great results, and we know there are still lots of opportunities for improvement.
In regards to your continuity in care, does CCAC maintain your wait lists for your long-term care home?
Yes, absolutely. So that's one of the things that's actually on our strategic plan for the next 5 years is how we can move that continuum ratio. So in Ontario, for those of you who aren't from here, we don't govern access to our long-term care homes. We know today that in just above 40% of those that live with us in our retirement homes actually move into one of our long-term care homes. But it isn't a free flow access. We don't control who goes from retirement into long-term care. And it's something that we have advocated for and will continue to advocate for within the system. Nothing is more heart-wrenching when you see a family get split or divided. Imagine being married for 40 or 50 years and suddenly, because you can't afford to stay in retirement any longer, you have to move to long-term care away from your spouse. And so, you know, we are fortunate. Sometimes they can go to another one of our long-term care homes within that region. But sometimes they do get separated, which is really quite a shame. So it is on our strategic plan to continue to work towards improving that continuum ratio.
So actually that was a policy question I did have about how you manage that continuum. But the second question, which is hopefully a very quick one, or we can talk, anybody wants to hear your answer, we can ask you after. What do you do about the communication binder in terms of privacy, and can family members put something in addition to staff?
That's a great question. Different villages have other things. I've seen what's called tidbits, where they collect pieces of information around residents and family members can add information to it. Because of the confidentiality that needs to exist in our resident rights, those binders are contained within our areas. But I think what I was trying to convey is that information is shared across the team. So it's not just one department, that everything's getting shared or communicated at the same time to everyone who's part of a greater team. Today, I don't know that there may be contributions made on behalf of by family members for residents, but I don't know that they are writing that information down in that binder. It's probably conveyed to a team member because we couldn't say what was written above or what could be written on other pages. But thank you for that clarification.
I just had a question about the neighborhood coordinators. Are they full-time positions?
They are.
And do they get absorbed in the funded envelopes? And if so, when they were first implemented, was there any sort of pushback from the frontline staff thinking that the money's being invested in another manager per se, as opposed to hands-on care? Just wondering how that went when you rolled that rollout.
It's a great question. We've been working through this model for, well, I think 2005 was the first time we sort of had some of these concepts around it. And then I'm trying to think back to our original neighborhood coordinators, the position around funding, it is a full-time position that supports the team. So we have not had any concerns around that position taking the place of a personal support worker who could be there. The reality is that they are very hands-on individuals, and their job is to make sure that our neighborhoods are supported, both from a team member perspective and a resident and a family member perspective. So no, we haven't had any issues come forward with respect to that whatsoever.
Jennifer, and is that, I think the question too was, how is that position paid for? Does it come out of one of the funding envelopes?
Long-term care is funded, and it's through there are 3 different envelopes that support that. How that's particularly worked out, I don't have the specific details on. But if you are interested more in that, I would encourage you to reach out to Paul, and he can help you with that for sure.
What kind of hours or shifts or expectations do you have in terms of when those coordinators are on site?
It really depends. The nice thing is that they are part of a greater team, and so our model is a little different than others. Our leadership teams support all shifts, so whether that's some that come in early or some that stay later, it really depends on the needs of their neighborhood. So some work at 9 to 5, some come in and work from 12 to 8, depending on what their day. It's really based around the rhythms of their neighborhood. They know what they need to support their neighborhoods, whether that's a particular family or a particular team member. So really they govern themselves accordingly.
And it's 1 FTE per neighborhood?
It is not. They support actually 2 neighborhoods. So they have 64 residents across 2 neighborhoods. Sometimes it's a neighborhood above and below, and sometimes that's neighborhoods that are across from one another. So you'll see them floating between the 2 sides. They often hold an office in one place so that families know where they can find them, which may or may not be the neighborhood that their loved one lives in. But they work together with their teams.
Are they inside or outside the union?
They are not part of the union.